Hi, this is Susan Formby again from the Alzheimer's Association with the final module of our training, which is on caring for the family. There are many factors to consider in providing case management to people with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias and their families, and supportive care is extremely important. In this part of the training, we'll look at cultural and diversity considerations and talk about caring for the caregiver. You will see that there is some overlap in this section and the previous section. Culturally, there are a number of negative views of Alzheimer's disease. For example, some see Alzheimer's as a mental disease that is somehow shameful. Among some Latino and Asian families, there is a stigma associated with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and this can lead to resistance in disclosing the diagnosis. The Chinese name for dementia is Chai Dai, which also means silly, stupid, idiotic, and retarded, which of course can have an impact on people's feelings about it. Some African Americans may not want to use the term Alzheimer's disease because they fear the images that the term evokes in others. So it's important as we work with families to be aware of these feelings and to help families understand that they really don't need to be embarrassed or feel shamed by this diagnosis. It often helps when families understand that they're not alone in this experience, that many families of all cultures and backgrounds are caring for persons with the same conditions. And I often say to people, you're in good company here, and we don't want you to feel alone in this. In some cultures, there are specific ideas as to the roles families play with regard to caregiving. Some feel that caregiving is a family responsibility, that it's wrong to sort of go outside the family for help or to, quote unquote, air our dirty laundry in public. Some feel that it's shameful to complain or admit that caregiving is demanding and difficult. Some cultures include an expectation that the daughter has the responsibility to care for her parents while the son is seen as the decision maker. In some traditions, there is more of an expectation that the person will live with the family rather than be put in a long-term care facility. And all of these can make for more stress on the family, which is already faced with big challenges in the care of a person with dementia. We also want to lift up the special considerations around the needs of the LGBT community. Because of the historic inequalities in the law and in healthcare practices, it's important that people who are LGBT have important documents like a durable power of attorney for health care, advanced health care directive, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment or POLST order, release of medical information, hospital visitation authorization on file. And this also means that, again, as we've said previously, that an early diagnosis can be very important because it allows the person to more actively participate in decision-making. As a case manager, keep in mind that there may be issues within families about who gets to make decisions about care and who is immediate family. And if the paperwork is on file about the person's wishes, then these topics may be easier to navigate through later on. We've talked extensively today about case managers engaging caregivers in the case management process. We also want to talk about the need for caregivers to be supported and cared for themselves, so they can provide ongoing and effective care to people with dementia. Here's Waldo. This cartoon reflects something important about caregivers. Like the person with Alzheimer's, they too should be assessed so their needs can be taken care of. It's important to ask how the caregiver is doing so we can help put supportive resources in place for them. The toll on Alzheimer's caregivers is enormous. The physical and emotional stress of caregiving costs a staggering $9.3 billion in additional health care for the caregivers. We talked earlier about the cost of the care of the person, but they're not the only person who ends up needing additional health care. 60% of ADRD caregivers rate emotional stress as high or very high. Caregivers who are taking care of people report increased burnout, depression, and stress as compared to people caring for somebody who does not have dementia. And health plans need to focus on caregivers to make sure that their needs are also being addressed. Alzheimer's affects everyone in the family. And this next video, which is from the HBO Alzheimer's Project, shows a granddaughter who's visiting her grandmother.
At first, when I was younger, she would forget where to put things, but then the disease got worse and she couldn't remember who I was. She lives downstairs in the lower part of my house, so I do see her every day after school. We're very good friends, my grandma and I. We like to take walks and bake Rhubarb pies. And sometimes we'll just chat for hours on end or spend the whole day playing games of pretend. Yay.
I love you.
I love you too, Grandma. Can I wipe your mouth? Thank you. I wonder what's going inside her brain a lot, and I can't imagine to be in her position. Like sometimes she'd be in a good mood, and sometimes she'd be in a bad mood. It's really painful to see her that way. This weekend, Grandma, I went over to Jasmine's house. Remember Jasmine? I've known her since I was in pre-K. She lives with her mom and her stepdad, and her dad lives 2 blocks away on College Avenue.
Go home.
What's the matter, Grandma?
I'm going home.
When Grandma was in there yelling at you, try not to take it personal. Really, it's not Grandma that's talking to you, it's the disease. So just try to remember that, Grandma loves you. Just some part of her that's still searching for her memory. And is trying to find it, but she can't.
Mommy tells me just to cherish the moments that she remembers us and even the moments that she doesn't remember us, because one day we're going to miss her.
Yeah, Grandma spent years taking care of you, and now it's just our turn to understand what she's going through and to take care of her. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
I like this video because it really does serve as a reminder that while the adults are trying to cope with all of the challenges of caring for a person with dementia, there are often children around who are also impacted. Earlier, we looked at the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. But there are also warning signs of caregiver stress, depression, and fatigue. In our care for people with ADRD, we must also consider the well-being and health of the caregivers. And there is always potential for caregiver stress, depression, and fatigue. I'm thinking about a caregiver I spoke with recently on our helpline. She was so exhausted and stressed that she really wasn't able to participate much in problem solving for the issues she called about. So we talked first about a plan for her to get some much needed rest and agreed to talk again about her other concerns. And I think she really needed to hear that while her mother's needs are important, her needs are important as well. So these 10 warning signs: denial, anger, social withdrawal, anxiety, depression, exhaustion, sleeplessness, irritability, lack of concentration, and any number of health problems, all of those can come into play here for a caregiver. And so we hope that you'll be able to use these 10 warning signs as a tool to help caregivers to identify these dangerous stressors in their own experience. Sometimes I think it just takes so much energy for a caregiver to simply put one foot in front of another that he or she doesn't recognize that they're in trouble. And of course, the Alzheimer's Association is an ongoing resource for these families, and we provide supportive services that really can make a difference. There are unique considerations for caregivers who care for a person with dementia. Caregiving will become more and more demanding as the disease progresses, and the role of the caregiver will become more intense, and this is inevitable. Caregivers will need help in planning ahead for this. Caregivers will eventually need to learn a whole new language to effectively communicate with the person who has dementia. This includes behavior and communication approaches. The IDEA approach that we talked about earlier can really help caregivers with this. Caregivers need help in remembering that because of the disease, they'll need to adapt, that they really cannot expect the person with dementia to change. This is very hard for many caregivers. They continue to try to reason with the person, explaining over and over to the person whose short-term memory is so impaired that he'll never be able to remember what he has been told. We actually have a training video titled "He's Doing This Despite Me," and that title kind of says it all about how frustrated caregivers get. And this video shows that dynamic. It helps families understand that he is actually doing the best he can and that they must change their expectations of the person. Role changes occur when a person is ill and dependent on others. However, though a daughter may now feel more like the mother, it will continue to be important for her to address her mother respectfully and to look for ways to let her mother make the decisions she's still able to make. It can really be helpful for the daughter to find ways to ask for her mother's advice or input. For example, say to her mother, "I don't know how you made it through our teenage years. How did you do it?" And some very interesting conversation might ensue from an opening like that. Or maybe to say to her, "I don't know how you made that pecan pie that is so delicious. How did you make it so special?" So interactions like this help to preserve that mother-daughter relationship in some positive ways that are helpful for both the person who has dementia and for the caregiver. Caregivers will likely need to identify support systems such as neighbors, friends, family, church, etc., a whole support team if possible. The more support caregivers have, the more likely they will be able to continue caregiving. Caregivers will need some time off, some respite. They need support in learning that it's okay to take a break and that they need to have some time to themselves. You may have, some of you may have had training in T-Care, and this slide reflects a T-Care concept we believe strongly in, and that is that every caregiver is different. It's not necessarily the caregiving itself, it's how the caregiver feels about the caregiving. For some caregivers, the physical task of caregiving, like bathing and grooming, may not be that stressful. For others, they're overwhelming or very uncomfortable. For example, an adult son caring for his mother may find that when his mother needs physical care, that becomes a deal breaker for him. Some caregivers may find losing their role of spouse and feeling more like a caregiver is extremely difficult, while others take it in stride. While most caregivers could benefit from respite, some may not, and having someone else caring for their loved one for some people is too stressful. It's important to remember that the timing of respite services can be the important factor here. A caregiver who, maybe doesn't welcome help at one point may be very ready to accept help at a later time. In addition to the traditional referrals we make, we can also help caregivers sort of think outside the box and identify sources of support that fit their unique needs. One caregiver told me that she had taken up line dancing while another took regular long walks. We can support caregivers in tending to their own health needs, participating in caregiver education classes, such as those offered by the Alzheimer's Association, and help them identify respite resources. A key component, really, of effective dementia care case management is connecting families to resources, as you know, and throughout our training, we've alluded to the importance of resources and support services. So now we're going to go into a little bit more of a discussion about those resources. Given everything we have discussed today, we can ask, why are referrals to support services and community resources so important specifically in dementia care management? And we just recognize that caring for a person with dementia presents enormous demands on a caregiver. And at the Alzheimer's Association, we tell family caregivers that no one should have to do this alone, that everyone needs and deserves help and support in taking on this challenge. Helping families to navigate dementia care really leads to some much better outcomes in many families. As we talked about earlier, it helps to reduce those hospital readmissions because things are sort of being taken care of at home, and crises are kept to a minimum or avoided. Good support for the home care situation will certainly help to prevent or delay the need for the person to go into an institutionalized kind of setting. And certainly we're talking about improving the quality of life for everybody involved here. So, making referrals. Referring families to supports and services is important, but it's equally important that it's done in a manner that actually assists them and doesn't just frustrate them or cause them to go sort of on a wild goose chase. There are so many resources available in the community to support the person with dementia, and caregivers and case managers need to feel comfortable connecting the dots. I'm sure many of you do that quite naturally and are used to referring folks to these kinds of agencies and services. The Alzheimer's Association is happy to help with that process, help them understand what's out there and how to find services that will hopefully fit their particular needs. The Alzheimer's Association serves diverse communities. We have a language line available when an interpreter is needed on our helpline. And almost all the services for families are free. There is no sliding scale. In Georgia, we have offices in all of these cities with staff available to assist and support families and professionals caring for persons with Alzheimer's disease and related disorders. So if you weren't aware of the office in your area, we hope you'll become aware of that. The association has an award-winning information-filled website. I tell people I hope you'll sit down with a cup of coffee and just explore it when you have a few minutes one day. There's a lot there, a lot of little drop-down menus and things that you may not be aware of without sort of closer inspection. We have a 24-hour helpline that's staffed with trained counselors. This includes staff at our national level and the staff in our local Georgia offices. The initial call often goes first to that national helpline, the 1-800 number, but very often it's also referred back to us in the local offices for follow-up. So it's a continuous, we're all part of that same system with the helpline. Care consultation, and that's what I am, I'm a care consultant, is a more in-depth way of assisting families in assessing their current needs and making a plan to address those needs. And we provide those care consultations either on the phone or sometimes in person. We have family caregiver educational classes, and these provide not only the educational piece but also a lot of support. We have early stage services that are the relative newcomer among our services, a lot more emphasis on helping people in early stage Alzheimer's to live the best quality life that is possible. And so services might include counseling, support groups, and enjoyable activities for people in early stage. We have support groups for family caregivers in person and on the phone. There's the Medic Alert and Safe Return Safety Services, which we have talked about earlier. We really encourage people to take advantage of that. We have advocacy. We're very involved in advocating to policymakers and to legislators, both at the state and the federal level. We have professional training for healthcare folks, and we support research in a number of ways, and one of those is to encourage people who are interested to participate in the clinical trials that may be in their area. So we have a program called Trial Match that helps people to find the studies that may be in their area so they can take a look. When somebody calls the Alzheimer's Association 24/7 helpline, they'll be connected to information and referrals. The cases are also triaged, so if there is a crisis call or ongoing support is needed, the case will be referred to a care consultant. For any type of crisis, urgent need, emergency type situation, a care consultant of the day will immediately take that call. And care consultants will work with families through the course of the disease. I always say to people who've called for the first time, just consider this your first call to us. We hope you will be in touch with us as your needs change and as you have more questions or just need to talk to somebody or get some support. Because Alzheimer's is fluid, the cases are too. They can move from ongoing to support to crisis and back and forth, and we know that they're not 9 to 5 challenges, so that's why we're very glad to be able to offer this 24-hour service. We hope to help families avoid the crisis situations and work toward other ways of solving problems other than in the middle of a crisis. So we thank you so much for participating in this webinar. We hope it's been helpful to you, and that is the last of our webinar. Thank you so much.